Thomas King has long been celebrated for his work as an Indigenous author in Canada, including for his best-known book, The Inconvenient Indian. But King says he's now learned a shocking truth about his heritage. He's not Indigenous at all. CBC's Griffin Yeager reports.
He built his career telling Indigenous stories, and now Thomas King, in an op-ed published by the Globe and Mail, says he is not Indigenous and has no Cherokee ancestry despite believing he did all his life. The American Canadian received numerous awards in this country for writing about Indigenous life. Here he is in 1993 talking about his book, Green Grass Running Water.
In Green Grass Running Water, I'm looking at forming my world, that world that I see, around more native models.
King maintains that he did not pretend to have Indigenous roots and thought it was true. He says he was 3 when his father left, and though his mother rarely spoke of him, she said he was part Cherokee. King says he'd heard rumors questioning his indigeneity, and this year made an effort to check. This brought him to the Tribal Alliance Against Frauds. That's an organization that investigates claims of Indigenous ancestry, which looked into his past and found no Cherokee heritage. In his Globe and Mail article, King writes, "At 82, I feel as though I've been ripped in half, a one-legged man in a two-legged story." Indigenous writer Jesse Wente took to his social media to share that this is a familiar hurt.
This should have been taken care of long ago, and I don't know, I can't speak to why people don't resolve these own issues if they're going to represent themselves in ways publicly.
Look out, Bob shouts. There are Indians flying into the skyscrapers and falling on the sidewalk. Got a Mohawk over here.
Others are saying people should take greater care in checking their roots before claiming Indigenous heritage.
It's easy to verify too. So, looking back on Thomas King's claims, perhaps he let it slide for too long and it had hardened.
King says that he hopes to keep supporting Indigenous causes, but he's not sure they'll want to stand beside him now. Griffin Yeager, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's discuss this further with Tanya Talaga. She is Anishinaabe, an author and columnist for the Globe and Mail. She's also a member of the Fort William First Nation and the founder of Makwa Creative, a production company focused on sharing Indigenous stories. And she joins us today from Kitchener, Ontario. So first of all, your reaction to this story, Tanya?
Well, like many people, I was absolutely devastated to hear that the rumors that we had heard for the last several years were actually true, and that Thomas King is, in fact, not Cherokee at all.
So he says that he did not purposefully pretend to have Indigenous roots. Do you believe him?
It's really awful. I don't understand how you can live your whole life and just not really know the truth. And what I mean by that is not seek it out in a more fulsome way. I can understand that he believed for a long time that his father, his true father, was Cherokee. But what makes me sad is that there was a lack of extreme curiosity to get to the bottom of the story. Tom King is a historian, and so he wrote the history of Indigenous North America since contact in the Inconvenient Indian. I would hope that you would, if you were a historian, you would also look at your own history and do the same thing. So it's disappointing to see that after all this time, that history was not truly sought after.
Yeah, a serious topic. I do want to point out, as you pointed out to me, you're at the library in Kitchener next to a coffee machine. So if people hear some sound, that's what's going on close to you. Back to our topic, King wrote an essay in the Globe and Mail, and he started it by posing a question: when is an Indian not an Indian? How would you answer that?
When is an Indian not an Indian? I don't think you're an Indian if you don't have any ties to community. If there is no one that knows you, knows of you, can claim you, Many of us have aunties and uncles, grandparents and great-grandparents that live in First Nations communities or adjacent to First Nation communities, or, on the side of the road near a First Nation community. This is something that we have. We have these kinship ties, and if we don't know who our families are because of displacement, because of colonization, and because of things like the child welfare system, so many of us try and find our belonging, try and find our kinship, and try and find our relations. An Indian is not an Indian if that doesn't happen, right? If there's there isn't that tie, and the horrible thing about these stories is essentially that every time these happen, people that are out there, our brothers and our sisters, our cousins, our aunties, our uncles that are trying to come home and haven't been able to, they see these stories and then they feel themselves that whole again, and maybe I'm not who I think I am. And that's why stories like this are just so devastating.
One last question. He has a body of work, of books that have been so well respected. And I've heard Indigenous people talk about how insightful those books are, and in some cases, how proud they've made other Indigenous people. How should we see those books now?
Well, we need to see those books for the truth that they are. They've been written by an ally, but they've been not written by somebody who is First Nations. And so all of the material that he has written underneath that identity needs to be questioned as to how are you reading those textbooks. They are not from an Indigenous person. They are from someone who is an ally instead.
Tanya Talaga, I know this isn't easy to talk about or to reflect on, and I appreciate you speaking about it with us this evening. Thank you.
Miigwech, thank you for having me.